The first time Helena walked into my consulting room, she placed a small key on the table before she even sat down. She did not explain where it had come from. She simply pushed it a few inches toward me, as though she expected me to recognize the object or somehow understand, through a means she herself could not describe, why she had brought it. Helena was 38 years old. She worked as an administrator in a family-owned company, had been married for 11 years, and had a 9-year-old daughter. Her appearance conveyed the impression of a highly organized woman. Her hair was carefully pulled back, her coat did not have a single wrinkle out of place, and her handbag rested beside the chair, perfectly aligned with the leg of the table. Yet she was gripping her own hands with a force that did not match the calm she was trying to project. I asked her what the key opened. Helena waited a few seconds before answering that it belonged to a house that no longer existed. The sentence could have referred only to a building that had been demolished, but the way she said it suggested something else. It seemed as though that house still existed somewhere inside her, and that Helena was still searching for a way back into it. Today, I want to tell you about this case because I believe many women may recognize something of themselves in Helena's story. They may never have carried a small key inside their purse, but they may have spent years watching changes in someone's mood, interpreting silences, and trying to discover the exact behavior that would keep another person from pulling away. Helena believed she had come to me because of her husband. For some time, I also believed the center of the problem lay only within the marriage. But there was something about that key, about the way she touched it, and about the particular moments when she seemed suddenly aware of its presence. The true meaning of the object did not emerge until much later, after a dream, a question Helena could not answer, and an unexpected piece of information from her mother. When we finally understood why she carried that key, it was no longer possible to see her relationship with her husband in the same way. During that first session, however, Helena said only that she had found the object in a drawer the previous day. She did not know why she had placed it in her purse, and she seemed relieved when the subject changed. She then began talking about Martin. According to Helena, he had been attentive during the first years of their marriage. He talked with her over dinner, showed interest in the events of her day, and took an active role in their daughter's routine. Over the previous several months, however, he had begun coming home later, giving brief answers, and avoiding conversations that had once felt natural between them. Helena made a point of clarifying that she had no proof of an affair. She repeated this several times, even though I had not yet asked whether there was another woman. What disturbed her, she explained, was the persistent feeling that something had changed. When I asked her to describe that change, she gave me a long sequence of small incidents. Martin took longer to respond to messages. He had begun leaving his phone face down. He declined plans because he was tired, and became impatient when Helena asked whether something was wrong. None of those signs, taken alone, allowed for a definite conclusion. Together, however, they suggested that a distance had entered the marriage and needed to be acknowledged. As Helena described each episode, she kept returning to the same need. She wanted to understand what was happening. Martin came home late, and she searched for an explanation. He avoided a conversation, and she mentally reconstructed everything they had said to each other during the week. When he claimed to be merely tired, Helena studied his face, the pauses between his words, and the way he left the room. After nearly 40 minutes, I asked what she intended to do once she finally obtained the answer she was searching for. Helena seemed confused by the question. She explained that her decision would depend on what she discovered. I then asked whether there was any answer that would make her consider that the situation could no longer continue. Her hand moved toward the small key, but stopped before touching it. After a long silence, Helena clarified that she had not come for help ending her marriage. I had not suggested that she should. I only wanted to understand whether she could imagine a limit beyond which investigating Martin would become less important than observing what the relationship was doing to her. Helena began defending her husband. She said that every marriage went through difficult periods. Martin was a good father, had never been aggressive, and carried many responsibilities in his father's company. Then she began explaining his childhood. She spoke about a demanding mother, an emotionally distant father, and a household in which Martin had learned to hide his feelings. Within minutes, she had constructed a careful explanation for nearly every behavior that caused her pain. When she finished, I asked how much time she devoted to understanding her own suffering with the same attention she gave to Martin's limitations. The question irritated her. Helena answered that she did not want to see herself as a victim, and added that she was probably doing something wrong as well. I explained that this might be true, but responsibility for her own behavior did not erase Martin's responsibility for his choices. Helena fell silent. Instead of feeling relieved, she appeared even more tense. At that moment, I did not try to explain why. The hypothesis still needed time to develop. Yet I was beginning to see that Helena preferred to imagine herself partly at fault, rather than admit that something in the marriage was beyond her control. If part of the problem belonged to her, then there was still something she could correct. She could become more patient, less anxious, more interesting, more understanding, or more desirable. Guilt preserved the possibility of action. As long as she believed she was failing, she could also believe that changing enough would allow her to save the relationship. Accepting the other person's freedom would be far more painful. It would mean acknowledging that Martin could choose to withdraw, regardless of everything Helena did. At the end of the session, I asked again about the key. She explained that it had belonged to her maternal grandmother's house, where she had spent part of her childhood. The property had been sold many years earlier, and later demolished to make room for an apartment building. Helena did not know why her mother had kept the key, or how it had ended up in that drawer. When she stood to leave, she forgot the object on the table. I called to her before she reached the door. She came back immediately, picked up the small key, and carefully placed it inside her purse. During the next 3 sessions, Helena spoke almost exclusively about Martin. She reported entire conversations, analyzed changes in his tone of voice, and tried to interpret details that may not have meant anything at all. One week, he had taken 4 hours to answer a message. Another time, he declined a dinner because he had an early meeting. Helena presented each incident as a piece of a puzzle that, once completed, would finally allow her to rest. I asked how much time she spent thinking about the marriage. At first, she said it was not constant. Gradually, she admitted that she checked her phone when she woke up, observed Martin's behavior over breakfast, and replayed conversations on her way to work. During professional meetings, part of her attention remained occupied with imagining what her husband truly felt. When she returned home, she studied his face before even greeting him. The relationship had stopped being one part of her life. It had become the system through which Helena evaluated everything else. When Martin seemed close, she relaxed. When he appeared distant, even her work lost importance. I explained that I was not saying her life was empty. Helena worked, cared for her daughter, and maintained a few friendships. The question was, where the emotional center of that life had come to rest. She did not like the answer that began to emerge. The center was Martin. That conclusion conflicted with the image Helena held of herself. She had always considered herself independent. She started working at 19, helped her mother financially, and took on adult responsibilities at a young age. She could solve practical problems without asking for help, and took pride in never having been a needy wife. It was precisely this identity that drew my attention. Psychological dependence does not always appear as visible weakness. In some cases, the most capable woman is the one who struggles most to recognize how deeply her emotional stability depends on another person's response. Helena did not ask for help. She anticipated needs. She did not admit that she felt insecure. She became even more helpful. Instead of asking Martin directly whether he still wanted the marriage, she prepared a special dinner, bought something he liked, or offered support for a problem he had not even mentioned. Her anxiety did not make her passive. It made her excessively active. She tried to earn security through usefulness. During the 5th session, Helena arrived 10 minutes late. She was agitated and, for the first time, had not brought the small key in her purse. Martin had told her he planned to spend the weekend alone at a friend's country house. He said he needed time to think. Helena had tried to appear understanding, but she had not slept that night. She repeatedly asked whether he intended to leave the marriage, and Martin answered that he still did not know. I asked what she had done after the conversation. Helena explained that she initially promised to respect his need for space. Half an hour later, she sent a message saying she understood the pressure he was under. Then she wrote again to clarify that she did not intend to pressure him. The following morning, she added that she would be available if he wanted to talk. When justifying the messages, Helena said she did not want Martin to interpret her silence as indifference. That explanation revealed more than she realized. Helena did not trust that the bond could survive unless she actively maintained it. Her absence, even briefly, seemed dangerous. Martin might step away and discover that he did not miss her. I asked what she imagined would happen if she sent nothing else during the weekend. She answered that perhaps her husband would realize he was better off without her. For the first time, the problem was no longer only Martin's behavior. The fear organizing Helena's actions appeared before us. She was not only trying to save the marriage, she was trying to prevent her husband from having an inner experience over which she had no control. If he withdrew and discovered that he preferred the distance, Helena would be confronted with a reality that no explanation or effort could change. That was why she remained present, even when promising to give him space. I explained that this reaction could be understood as the activation of a complex. A complex is an emotional core formed by experiences, memories, and beliefs that gather around a particular theme. When a present situation touches that core, the person does not respond only to what is happening now. The reaction carries the intensity of everything the complex has accumulated. Martin was asking for a few days. Helena's body was hearing a much greater threat. She answered that she had not been abandoned as a child. Her observation was understandable. Many people search for a dramatic event and, when they cannot find one, conclude that the past has no connection to the present. I asked what the first years of her life had been like. Helena told me that her parents worked long hours. Her mother was a nurse who often worked night shifts. Her father spent extended periods traveling as a sales representative. During the week, she frequently stayed at her maternal grandmother's house. As she spoke about that place, her expression changed. For the first time since the treatment began, some of the usual tension left her face. Helena described an old house with dark wooden floors, heavy curtains, and a small garden in the back. Her grandmother baked bread in the mornings and allowed Helena to sleep in her room during thunderstorms. According to Helena, it was the only place where she did not have to guess anyone's mood. I asked what she had needed to guess at her parents' home. She explained that her mother returned from night shifts exhausted and could not always tolerate noise. Her father came home from his trips wanting peace. Neither parent was cruel, but the emotional atmosphere could change quickly. The child learned to read the signs. She knew when she could tell a story and when it was better to remain quiet. She could tell by the way her mother closed her handbag whether the evening would be calm. She recognized the sound of her father's footsteps in the hallway and anticipated whether he wanted conversation or solitude. Her sensitivity had been useful. Helena became an easy, attentive, mature child. When her grandmother died, she was 12 years old. The house was sold shortly afterward. Her mother explained that there was no reason to keep an empty property, and the family spoke very little about the loss. I asked whether Helena remembered saying goodbye to the house. She answered that she did not. I also asked whether she had returned after her grandmother's death. Helena said she had gone there only once. Her mother entered to collect a few remaining objects, while Helena stayed in the car. She could not explain why she had not gone inside. That night, after the session, Helena had a dream. She was standing in front of the old house, even though she knew it had already been demolished. The door was closed. She held the small key in her hand, but the lock had been replaced. From the other side, she could hear a child dragging a chair across the floor. She tried to call out, but no sound came from her mouth. Helena woke with the feeling that someone was trapped inside the house. When she told me about the dream, I asked who the child might be. She said she did not know and tried to dismiss the image as unimportant. I did not force an immediate interpretation. Dreams should not be compelled to confess their meaning before a person is ready to recognize it. I asked only how she had felt when she heard the sound behind the door. Helena answered that she felt an urgent responsibility to get the child out. The response repeated the same pattern found in her waking life. When faced with vulnerability, she immediately assumed a task. The child did not awaken only curiosity or tenderness. The child awakened responsibility. Perhaps she represented the part of Helena that had remained attached to her grandmother's house, the only place where she had not needed to monitor the atmosphere in order to secure belonging. Yet Helena could not think of the child as a part of herself. She saw her as someone who needed to be rescued. The same thing was happening in her marriage. Martin appeared tired, distant, or unhappy, and Helena assumed responsibility for restoring him. If he felt well again, the bond would be safe. As long as Helena remained occupied with managing his emotional state, she would not have to discover who was behind the door in the dream. I asked whether she had sent any more messages during the weekend. Helena said she had sent only one regarding their daughter. A moment later, she admitted that she had also sent a photograph and asked what time Martin planned to return. He had answered politely but distantly. Helena concluded that she had failed to give him space. I asked what she understood failure to mean. Her response showed that she expected to perform her own healing with the same perfection she demanded from herself in every other area of life. Once she recognized the pattern, she believed she should never repeat it again. I explained that a reaction learned over decades does not disappear after a single realization. The body does not immediately abandon a strategy that once seemed to guarantee safety. Helena's vigilance had begun long before Martin. She had learned that relationships depended on quickly reading other people, adapting herself, and never becoming a burden. The adult woman still believed that love would survive only as long as she continued performing this role. I asked what she considered her greatest quality in the marriage. Helena answered that she was always there. Then I asked what she imagined would happen if, for a while, she stopped being constantly available. She understood the question, but did not answer. During the next session, Helena brought the small key again and placed it on the table. She had called her mother because she wanted to know why the object had been kept. The answer disturbed her. Her mother was not certain that the key had belonged to the front door of the house. It might have opened a box, a cabinet, or some smaller lock. Helena had spent weeks believing she possessed the key to the entrance. The dream had reinforced that belief. Discovering that it might have opened only a piece of furniture seemed to destroy the meaning of the object. I asked why it was so important for her to believe that the key opened the front door. Helena answered that if it was the right key, she could still enter. I had to remind her that the house had been demolished many years earlier. She knew this rationally, yet her silence revealed that some part of her psyche still believed the object could provide a way back. At that moment, I understood that the small key was not merely a reminder of her grandmother. Something was still missing, however. We had not yet understood why Helena had found it precisely when the marriage began threatening her emotional stability. The answer would emerge after another crisis with Martin and the return of a memory she had kept outside conscious awareness for more than 20 years. Before that could happen, Helena would have to discover something that frightened her even more than the possibility of losing her husband. She would have to discover who the child behind the door truly was. The new crisis occurred a few days later. Martin returned home without any definitive answer about the marriage. He said only that he needed more time, and that he felt suffocated by the constant pressure to explain what he still did not understand within himself. Helena heard those words as confirmation of her worst fear. She tried to show that she understood, but soon began reminding him of everything they had built together, the commitments they had made, and the impact a separation would have on their daughter. Then she began describing all the ways she was willing to change. She promised to control her anxiety, ask fewer questions, take better care of herself, and place less pressure on him. She did not realize that she was still presenting a modified version of herself as a reason for Martin to stay. That night, she sent several messages. Some contained apologies. Others attempted to explain what she had really meant. The following morning, she deleted part of what she had written, even though the messages had already been read. She arrived at my consulting room convinced that she had ruined all the progress we had made. I explained that the awareness she had gained had not disappeared. The complex had simply taken control before she could recognize what was happening. Before beginning treatment, Helena repeated the pattern without observing it. Now, even though it still overwhelmed her during moments of greater threat, she was able to reconstruct the sequence once the emotional intensity had subsided. I asked her to go through the conversation slowly. As she did, she noticed an important detail. Martin had said that he felt pressured, but Helena had heard that she was impossible to love. That conclusion was not contained in his words. It belonged to an older layer of her experience. I asked when she had learned that another person's difficulty remaining close meant that something was wrong with her. That was when Helena returned to the death of her grandmother. For years, she had not considered the loss a form of abandonment, because she knew her grandmother had not chosen to die. The child's psyche, however, does not organize experience only according to the intentions of adults. The girl's body had recorded a simple and painful sequence. The only place where she did not have to monitor anyone's mood disappeared abruptly, and no one helped her understand what had happened. Her mother was occupied with practical arrangements. Her father was trying to keep the family functioning. The adults were grieving as well, but they expressed their pain through tasks, decisions, and silence. Shortly after the funeral, Helena was told that she needed to be strong. She obeyed. She returned to school, helped sort through her grandmother's belongings, and was praised for her maturity. She did not create difficulties, did not ask for excessive attention, and almost never cried in front of her parents. Her grief never found a place where it could be experienced in the presence of another person. When the house was sold, no one asked whether she wanted to go inside one last time. Her mother collected the remaining objects while Helena stayed in the car, watching the house through the window. During that session, a fragment of memory emerged that had remained hidden. Helena remembered seeing her mother close the front door. For a few seconds, she had wanted to get out of the car and ask her not to close it yet. She did not move. The girl understood that the adults had already made their decision, and that her grief would only delay something they considered necessary. The memory changed Helena's expression. She was not attached only to the loss of her grandmother, She remained bound to the moment when a door had been closed before she was able to say goodbye. When I asked what she would have wanted to say that day, Helena answered that she would have asked for more time. She had not been ready, and she felt that she had not finished being in that house. That response revealed the connection we had been missing. Whenever Martin spoke about withdrawing, Helena did not hear only an adult man expressing uncertainty about the marriage. A part of her psyche returned to the car, watching another door close before she could understand what she was losing. Her insistence was not merely an attempt to convince her husband. It was an attempt to prevent another experience from ending before she felt prepared. The desire for more time was human. The suffering began when Helena transformed that desire into an unconscious demand for control. No relationship guarantees that change, loss, or an ending will occur only when we are ready. Grief often begins precisely because reality does not wait for the ideal moment. Helena cried through much of that session. I did not immediately transform her pain into a lesson. Doing so would have repeated the old movement of turning suffering into a task before it could be fully experienced. When she was able to speak again, she asked whether all of this meant that she had never truly loved Martin. I explained that a relationship can contain genuine love, shared history, desire, companionship, and, at the same time, projections, complexes, and unconscious needs. Recognizing these layers does not invalidate the feeling. The problem was not that Helena had loved Martin. The problem lay in the impossible task that love had gradually been made to perform. Her husband had ceased to be only the man with whom she shared her life. He had also become the guardian of an emotional doorway. As long as he remained, the earlier loss seemed less likely to repeat itself. If he left, the girl would once again feel stranded outside. Helena wanted to know how she could distinguish love from fear. I explained that love allows two people to exist. Fear tries to manage one of them, so the other will not disappear. The distinction was uncomfortable. Helena recognized that her care for her husband was real, but she also saw that part of that care had become control. She wanted to know what Martin felt before he could organize those feelings himself. She tried to determine the timing of conversations, anticipate his doubts, and guide him back toward intimacy. She called this fighting for the marriage. Yet her effort relieved Martin of the responsibility to choose and kept Helena trapped in the role of the person who had to hold the entire structure together alone. The marriage could not become honest, while only one person carried the obligation to keep it alive. The memory of the girl in the car also changed the meaning of the small key. The object no longer represented only her grandmother's house. It became an image of the hope that there must be some way to prevent a final goodbye. Within the marriage, Helena searched for the right question, the ideal moment, and the exact amount of understanding that would restore Martin to the man he had been during their early years. She was not only trying to solve the present, she was trying to prevent another door from closing while she still felt trapped outside. That was when we understood why her husband's distance produced such an intense reaction. His withdrawal did not awaken only the fear of losing the marriage. It reactivated the old feeling that something important could disappear before Helena had time to understand, protest, or say goodbye. She wanted to know whether I believed everything was over. I explained that I did not possess that answer. What had certainly ended was the possibility of returning exactly to what had existed before. This happens in every living relationship. Even when a marriage continues, it does not return to the past. It must change in order to accommodate the transformations and revelations of the people within it. If Helena and Martin wanted to remain together, they would have to build something compatible with their present reality. She asked what would happen if Martin did not want to participate. I explained that her task would not be to convince him. She would have to decide how she intended to live in the presence of the truth he offered. Helena considered that answer cruel. For someone who had built her identity around being needed, accepting that she could not produce another person's choice felt like abandonment. Yet, I was not asking her to abandon Martin. I was trying to help her stop abandoning her own perception. That was when we began speaking about projection. We do not see only the person standing before us. We place upon them qualities of our own psyche that we have not yet recognized. Helena saw in Martin the ability to withdraw, reserve time for himself, and admit that he did not have answers. She considered those qualities cold, but they also fascinated her. Martin seemed to possess a freedom that Helena had never allowed herself to experience. Since childhood, she had learned to remain available. Withdrawing seemed selfish. Resting while someone else was dissatisfied felt irresponsible. Admitting uncertainty was nearly impossible because her identity demanded that she find solutions. Her husband carried the autonomy Helena had placed in her shadow. That did not make his behavior right. Projection does not erase facts. Martin remained responsible for his silence, his avoidance, and the way he participated in the marriage. Psychological work should not turn Helena into the cause of the entire crisis. Her responsibility was to recognize her participation without accepting blame that did not belong to her. As long as she believed that only Martin possessed freedom, any distance from him would feel like an absolute threat. Losing her husband would also mean losing a part of her own life that she had placed upon him. The task was not to imitate him or become indifferent. Helena needed to recover the ability to exist without continuously monitoring another person's emotional state. I asked whether she had abandoned any activity after getting married. She mentioned painting. In her youth, she had spent hours drawing and had even considered studying art. Her mother, worried about stability, advised her to choose a safer profession. Helena studied business administration and left her art supplies packed away. When I suggested that she begin painting again, she did not understand what it had to do with the marriage. I explained that perhaps not everything she did needed to serve the relationship. The idea seemed strange to her. Helena saw her time as a resource that needed to be useful. Work supported the household. Care maintained the family. Conversations protected the bond. Painting would guarantee nothing. For that very reason, it could offer a new psychological experience, doing something that belonged only to her. I asked her to reserve 2 hours during the week for painting. I also suggested that whenever anxiety arose, she record 3 things: the observable fact, her immediate interpretation, and the action she felt compelled to take. After writing them down, she was to wait 20 minutes before acting. The purpose of the pause was not to force her into silence. It was to create distance between the complex and her behavior. The following week, Helena returned embarrassed. In 5 days, she had recorded 19 moments when she felt compelled to act in order to reduce her anxiety. Some impulses appeared without any specific behavior from Martin. It was enough for him to seem quieter than usual, or to leave the room carrying his phone. On several occasions, Helena managed to wait. During the first few minutes, her anxiety increased. Later, she began to see that some of the images in her mind did not correspond to the facts. Once, Martin had taken a long time to respond because he was driving. On another occasion, he had genuinely avoided an important question. The exercise did not turn every perception into fantasy. It helped Helena distinguish what arose from the complex from what required an honest conversation. She had also painted. She drew the front of her grandmother's house, covered part of the image with dark paint, and created an illuminated window in the center. She considered the result poor. When I asked what she had felt while painting, she told me that for several hours she had not thought about Martin. The discovery surprised her, not because she had forgotten the marriage, but because she realized that her attention could inhabit another place. If this story is helping you recognize the difference between loving someone and organizing your entire life around that person's response, leave a like. It helps this reflection reach other women who may still confuse care with the obligation to prevent someone from leaving. A few days later, Martin again mentioned the possibility of separation. He said he no longer knew which feelings were genuine and which arose as a response to Helena's constant attempts to pull him closer. She repeated the old pattern. She explained that she insisted because he was distant, reminded him of everything she had done for the family, and tried to prove that she was saving the marriage. Martin ended the conversation and left. During the night, Helena sent more messages. In the following session, she recognized something decisive while reconstructing the episode. Martin had spoken about feeling pressured. She had heard that no one could love her for long. The sentence had not come from him. It belonged to the girl who had learned to remain easy, useful, and attentive so she would not lose her safe place. This time, however, Helena did not turn the insight into another promise of perfection. She began to accept that the complex would continue to appear, especially when the threat of loss became intense. The change would not consist of never feeling afraid again. It would consist of recognizing the fear before it made every decision. I then asked her to do something more difficult than waiting 20 minutes before sending a message. She needed to speak with Martin once, clearly, without attempting to persuade him. She would tell him what she wanted, what conditions she considered necessary for continuing, and how long she was willing to remain in uncertainty. Then she would have to observe his response. Helena took 2 weeks to have that conversation. When she returned, she had brought the small key, but kept it inside her purse. Martin still did not know whether he wanted to remain married. He agreed to begin couples therapy, provided that Helena stopped monitoring every change in his mood and accepted that the process would not produce an immediate answer. Helena, in turn, established a limit. She would participate for 3 months, as long as there was commitment, honesty, and genuine presence. She would not remain indefinitely in a relationship where only she was trying to rebuild closeness. Her voice had trembled during the conversation. I explained that courage does not require a steady voice. It requires only that a person not abandon the truth because she is afraid. Helena nearly withdrew the limit. She wanted to say that she could wait as long as necessary. Instead, she breathed and allowed Martin to remain silent. He did not provide the immediate reassurance she wanted. Helena returned to the bedroom and cried. The following morning, she felt fear and relief at the same time. The marriage remained uncertain, but she had stopped hiding that uncertainty behind endless effort. Reality still hurt. For the first time, however, the pain was not accompanied by the obligation to find an immediate action capable of controlling the outcome. Couples therapy began the following week. Martin acknowledged that he had withdrawn emotionally and used work and silence to avoid conflict. He also admitted that his distance intensified Helena's anxiety. Their pattern fed itself. The more Martin withdrew, the more Helena tried to pull him closer. The more she insisted, the further he retreated. Neither of them had created the dynamic alone. Both were responsible for how they continued participating in it. It was important to make this clear. Psychological work should not turn Helena into the cause of every problem. She needed to recognize her anxiety and attempts at control, without absolving Martin of his avoidance. Self-awareness does not mean taking responsibility for another person's wrongdoing, nor does it mean using another person's behavior as justification for remaining unconscious. Even if Helena changed, the marriage could still end. Inner transformation does not guarantee reciprocity. That truth frustrated her. For a time, she believed that if she controlled her anxiety, Martin would return to loving her as he once had. Her work on herself had become another strategy of reconquest. She was trying to become so secure and understanding that her husband would have no reason to leave. It was the old bargain expressed in more sophisticated psychological language. When she asked what the point of changing was if Martin could leave anyway, I explained that the purpose was to stop abandoning herself, regardless of his decision. The work deepened when Helena chose to continue without a guarantee. She began painting regularly. At first, she created houses, windows, and doors. Later, female figures appeared before open landscapes. She did not show the paintings to Martin or ask whether he considered the activity useful. For years, she had evaluated choices by the way they affected her family. Now she was experiencing something whose existence did not depend on usefulness or approval. Her persona was the responsible, predictable, available woman. The artist represented desire, spontaneity, imperfection, and an inner life that did not need to justify itself. By returning to painting, Helena allowed a less adapted identity to begin existing. These changes also appeared in ordinary decisions. One evening, Martin asked for help with work documents while Helena was painting. She told him she would help after she finished. His surprised expression immediately activated her guilt, but Helena stayed in the room. When she came out, she discovered that Martin had organized the documents himself. Nothing had collapsed. He had faced a responsibility without being rescued, and Helena had remained connected to herself, despite the discomfort. Autonomy stopped being a quality projected onto her husband. It became a capacity she could develop without abandoning care. During the second month of therapy, Martin began moving closer again. He became more involved in their daughter's routine, initiated conversations, and showed greater interest in Helena. She interpreted this change as proof of reconciliation. For several days, she abandoned painting, rearranged her schedule, and returned to monitoring every gesture he made. The pattern returned precisely when hope increased. Helena discovered that closeness also activated fear, because it created something that could be lost. I explained that the problem was not whether she moved closer or farther away, but the inner position from which each movement arose. She could spend time with Martin because she genuinely wanted to be with him. The behavior became unconscious when she abandoned herself to prevent the closeness from ending. Love does not mean maintaining distance to prove independence, nor does it mean unlimited availability. A mature relationship allows closeness, temporary separation, a shared life, and a private life. Fear turns everything into strategy. I asked Helena to observe whether she acted because something genuinely reflected her desire, or because she hoped to produce a reaction in her husband. The question exposed silent negotiations. When she offered help, she hoped to be recognized as indispensable. When she prepared something special, she expected affection in return. Even boundaries could be used to make Martin afraid of losing her. A genuine boundary does not exist to provoke pursuit. It defines the conditions under which someone can remain in a relationship without violating her own integrity. After a particularly difficult couples therapy session, Martin said he might not be able to recover his feelings for the marriage. Helena wanted to beg for more time, remind him of the years they had shared, and show him every change she was making. Instead, she returned home, entered the room where she painted, and sat on the floor. For nearly an hour, she did nothing. Her body trembled. Her throat felt closed. She picked up the phone several times but did not write. Later, she described that moment as one of the most difficult experiences of her life. She felt that she was allowing the marriage to die because she was doing nothing to save it. I asked what action could change Martin's feelings at that moment. Helena admitted that there was probably none. Then she realized that she was not allowing the marriage to die. She was allowing herself to stop pretending she could keep it alive alone. That realization changed the course of the case. Helena had confused love with maintenance. Whenever something weakened, she increased her effort. Sitting on the floor and feeling the pain without trying to change Martin was a form of inner action. She did not become passive. She abandoned only the work that did not belong to her. That night, she painted an open door with no house around it. At the end of the 3rd month, Martin decided to move out. There was no discovery of an affair and no dramatic argument. He said he needed to live separately in order to understand what he wanted. Helena considered the decision unfair, but recognized that she could not force him to remain her husband merely to protect herself from pain. On the first night after he left, she placed the small key on the kitchen table. The house was quiet. Her daughter was sleeping in her room. The objects remained in their usual places, and the life of the present still existed. For months, Helena had imagined that if Martin left, he would take the entire structure of her existence with him. The pain was intense, but the walls remained standing. Her body continued breathing. The following day still required decisions. That realization did not eliminate grief. Helena still checked her phone, missed him, and imagined that Martin would return full of regret. Yet she began to recognize those fantasies as attempts by the mind to quickly restore a familiar future. She continued separating facts, interpretations, and responsibilities. The fact was that Martin had moved out. Her interpretation said that he would find a better life and prove that Helena had never been enough. Her responsibility involved caring for her daughter, organizing practical matters, communicating clearly, and allowing herself to grieve. His responsibility included facing the consequences of his decision, fulfilling his responsibilities as a father, and choosing honestly what he wanted. Separating these elements returned Helena to the present. That was when she understood something no statement about self-love had ever been able to teach her. Loving herself did not mean feeling good while alone. It meant observing how she treated herself while she was suffering. She still wanted Martin to return. The difference was that she no longer intended to pay for his return with the loss of her dignity. When he expressed longing, Helena did not automatically transform the emotion into a promise. One evening, Martin came to have dinner with their daughter and remarked that he missed the house. Helena almost told him that he could return whenever he wanted. Before speaking, she asked whether he missed the place or whether he wanted to rebuild the marriage. Martin did not know how to answer. In the past, she would have filled the silence. This time, she allowed the absence of an answer to remain visible. She explained that she missed many things as well, but would consider reconciliation only if there were a clear choice and genuine effort from both of them. Martin left. Helena cried, but she did not regret what she had said. The boundary had not been created to make him pursue her. It remained true, even if he never returned. During the following weeks, Helena returned to work, resumed seeing friends, and continued painting. She also began feeling anger about the ways Martin had avoided conversations and allowed her to maintain the appearance of normality alone. The anger represented a part of her shadow beginning to return. For years, her persona as the understanding woman had not permitted conscious aggression. As a result, the energy that could have protected her boundaries had reappeared as anxiety, vigilance, and excessive effort. By integrating her anger, Helena could acknowledge that some of Martin's behavior had been unfair without turning him into an entirely bad person. She did not need to idealize him in order to love him or demonize him in order to step away. A little more than 5 months after our first session, she visited the street where her grandmother's house had once stood. There was an ordinary building on the property, with a bakery on the ground floor. Helena went inside, sat near the window, and drank coffee. No dramatic revelation occurred. She simply stayed there long enough to realize that she could remember her grandmother without trying to return. She thought about the girl who had remained in the car and understood that she could now take that girl away from the place. Later, she placed the small key in a box with photographs of her grandmother and stopped carrying it in her purse. She did not need to destroy the memory. She needed to stop using the past in an attempt to open every door in the present. Several weeks later, Martin showed greater clarity. He acknowledged his part in the marriage and said he wanted to try rebuilding the relationship, but not by returning to their former dynamic. Helena listened carefully. The part of her that still loved him felt hope. Another part remained connected to the facts. Rather than asking only what Martin felt, she wanted to know what he intended to do differently. He proposed continuing therapy, approaching reconciliation gradually, and taking responsibility for things he had previously left to Helena. She agreed to continue talking without promising reconciliation. The story did not end with certainty that the marriage would be saved. It ended with a woman who no longer needed to save it in order to preserve her own existence. If they returned to one another, they would need to build something new. If that proved impossible, Helena would continue to exist. That freedom did not diminish love. It removed from love the impossible task of guaranteeing her worth. Perhaps you recognize something of yourself in Helena's story. You may not carry a small key, but you may preserve another form of return. Old messages, idealized memories, or the hope of discovering the perfect behavior that will reopen a lost intimacy. The question is not only whether love still exists. Ask whether that love allows you to remain in contact with reality and with yourself. I want to leave you with a practice inspired by Helena's process. Choose the relationship that occupies most of your thoughts and describe a recent situation in which you feared being rejected, losing the person, or no longer being important. First, record only the observable facts. Then, write down the story your mind created from those facts. Next, identify the action demanded by fear and wait 20 minutes before acting. Finally, separate what belongs to you from what belongs to the other person. Your responsibility may include communicating a need, asking a direct question, honoring an agreement, or establishing a boundary. The other person's responsibility includes their honesty, choices, availability, and behavior. Do not assume their part through greater effort. Choose an action that remains right, even if it does not produce the response you want. The action does not need to be dramatic. It only needs to return something to you. Helena did not stop feeling anxious. The transformation was that anxiety no longer automatically took control. She could recognize the girl who feared being left outside without handing that girl every decision belonging to the adult woman. This is the purpose of individuation. Not to create a person without wounds, but to allow consciousness to develop a broader relationship with everything moving within the psyche. When pain is recognized, it stops governing in secret. When projection is withdrawn, the other person loses the power to carry entire parts of your identity. When the shadow is integrated, you recover the energy to protect your boundaries, create, rest, and choose. Continue with me on this channel as we explore anxiety, relationships, and the hidden movements of the feminine psyche. Share this story with a woman who may still be trying to open, in the present, a door that belongs to the past. She does not need to destroy what she lived through. She only needs to understand that her future begins when she stops searching the past for the only possible entrance.